Hello, everyone. This is Morya Cruz, and you're listening to the Spiritual Deep Dives podcast. For thousands of years, there were ancient spiritual truths and mystical teachings passed down only to the highest initiates walking the path back to God. It hasn't been until recent times that this secret knowledge has been available to the masses. Our team spent over 40 years researching many diverse spiritual, religious, and scientific sources, recording the wisdom from the ascended saints and sages of East and West, tapping into the Akashic Records and calling on God's Holy Spirit to reveal the spiritual truths and science behind the unseen forces that govern our lives. In this podcast, we will explore these teachings from a unique perspective that you probably have never heard before and show practical ways you can integrate them into your life to resolve deep-seated personal problems, accelerate your soul's evolution, and help solve the world's dilemmas. In the third episode of this 4-part series of spiritual deep dives, we will dig into the unseen world of discarnates, discover what they are capable of, and learn how to protect yourself against their influence. And most importantly, we will reveal the true cause of addictions and the reason why people find it impossible to stop even when they know they may die. That is until they discover the key that will unlock their permanent freedom. This episode will forever change your perceptions about addictions. A couple quick notes before we begin. First, all commentary is provided by Elizabeth Clare Prophet of the Summit Lighthouse. If you're not familiar with some of the terms mentioned in this episode, check out the program notes for descriptions. And lastly, because of the linear nature of this series, we recommend listening to episodes 6 and 7 before starting this one. So let's continue first with Mrs. Prophet's commentary on the movie, Ghost. Some discarnates are capable of moving physical objects. This is another thesis of the movie Ghost. When Sam is following his murderer, he encounters a tall, frightening discarnate on the subway. The discarnate throws him out of the car, telling him not to come into his territory again. This establishes the idea of a hierarchy of discarnates who take over certain spaces and don't want any other discarnates in it. To frighten Sam, the spirit smashes one of the subway windows. He has mastered the technique of doing things with physical objects. Later in the movie, Sam seeks out the subway discarnate and demands that he teach him how to move objects around. As Sam tries to move a soda can with his supposed body, the discarnate tells him, "You don't have a body now. You can't do it with your body, so everything has to come from your mind." He teaches Sam to use strong emotions, his love, his hate, his anger to move objects. Then he tells him it has to come from his gut. Your gut is your solar-plexus and your seat of the soul chakras. So Sam makes this tremendous effort to focus all of his energy in those chakras, and he succeeds in learning how to move objects in that way. Later, throughout the movie, he's able to move papers and pennies, turn the stove off, close doors, and type on a computer keyboard. He's even able to punch his murderer to protect Molly. There are many examples of similar psychic phenomenon people have caught on video that have been linked to discarnates called poltergeists, which means noisy ghost. You've probably seen YouTube clips of chairs moving, lights turning on and off, doors opening, and other mysterious things happening in houses. Whether or not some of these are fake, this is the nature of discarnates who hang around familiar places and use whatever attainment they had or got to move physical objects. Also, to record other types of phenomenon, ghost hunters will use a variety of visual and audio detection tools, such as EVP recorders, spirit boxes, and EMF detectors in hopes of catching a discarnate's voice or form. But remember, however spooky or scary this phenomenon may seem, these discarnates are not invincible or invulnerable. Our advice to you is not to enter into or become fascinated with death, or with any of the related things we are discussing in this series. If you just make the call to Archangel Michael and mighty Astrea, you can clear your space of these spirits. Make the calls to Archangel Michael to cut yourself free, and know that none of these things need to be a part of you, your life, or your household. When you have any sense or suspicion that there are discarnates around, you need to go to work with your decrees and call to Archangel Michael to come clear your house, your office, whatever room you're staying in. If I'm going to hold a lecture somewhere, I always arrive ahead of time and make the calls for that area to be cleared of all entities. See the podcast notes for links to decrees to Archangel Michael and Mighty Astrea that you can learn. Mrs. Prophet mentioned something else that's related to clearing discarnates from your space. She said, "For some reason, fresh paint actually gets rid of discarnates. I don't know why, but the masters told me there is a certain vibration of fresh paint that gets rid of old records. Subconsciously, people like to paint their houses and scrub them clean, because these processes get rid of entities who live off of decaying substance. Entities actually propagate themselves out of decay and take on many often grotesque forms. Decaying garbage, flowers, anything that's in the process of disintegration where the atoms are disassociating themselves, lets off energy. So along come the entities who leech that energy to prolong their existence. So you never want to leave anything that's in the state of decay laying around. That reminds me of another thing that always focuses entities, and that's these vintage doll collections. People have all these old dolls sitting in their house, and you go in and there's actually an entity looking through every doll at you. Now that's spooky. So let's continue with Mrs. Prophet's movie commentary. Another statement that the movie makes is that discarnates crave the same sensual pleasures they had while they were in human form. This is absolutely true. In the movie, while the subway discarnate is giving Sam his lesson on moving objects, he knocks out the window in a cigarette vending machine. Fondling the packs of cigarettes lying on the ground, he says, "Oh, what I would give for a drag." So this brings up the subject of discarnates attaching themselves to humans in order to experience life vicariously. The law of attraction states that like attracts like. This is what governs the movement of entities. Discarnate entities gravitate toward energy pools of a similar vibration. Just think about it. Entities of self-pity gravitate toward people who have self-pity. So there are entities who are attracted like magnets to any human vibration you can name. Whatever negative vibration a person is in, they will attract that entity. In contrast, if you have the joy of the Lord and light around you, you will not attract entities, but you will attract angels and higher beings. So attraction is a serious matter, and that's what you have to be careful of. Entities move compulsively, merging with other misqualified bodies that roam the astral world until they find shelter in the auras of like-minded individuals in embodiment. I hate to break it to you, but most people who are not actively making the calls mentioned earlier have some kind of entity around them that is very similar to themselves. They can't even tell because there's such a sympathetic vibration that they assume that their thoughts and feelings are their own. Some of their thoughts and feelings may actually be reflecting those of a discarnate entity that is very much like them. Morya, an Eastern Ascended Master, teaches that few among mankind are free from the influence of discarnate entities. Now, when you enter the path of light and determine to accelerate spiritually and move your personal evolution forward, the discarnate entities that have been around you perhaps for lifetimes will feel threatened and will try to remove you from that path. When you start giving decrees, the most powerful form of prayer there is, they will do anything they can to stop you. They will try to keep you from coming to decree services and will try to take you farther and farther away from that thread of contact with the Great White Brotherhood we discussed in episode 7. This is why it's important for keepers of the flame to pray for those who are introduced to the teachings of the Ascended Masters. The entities who are used to sapping their light are not going to take kindly when their host has been introduced to a path where they can be entity-free for the rest of their life. This is the path of the Great White Brotherhood and the science of the spoken word. Addictions such as alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and excessive sugar attract discarnate entities who had the same addictions while in embodiment. Bars and places where drug users hang out are literally packed with discarnates who attach themselves to those who are taking in these substances. Think of this. Sometimes there are as many as 50 to 100 entities attached like leeches to one individual who is smoking or taking drugs. By attaching themselves to that person's emotional body and their central nervous system, they can experience smoking that cigarette, taking that drink of alcohol, experiencing that fentanyl high or whatever sensual pleasures they were addicted to before losing their lives and physical bodies. They often tie into the back of the neck or the spinal column of an individual, which is where the greatest amount of energy can be siphoned off. So in this way, discarnates vicariously enjoy the pleasures to which they are accustomed. This transfer of energy takes place as the result of the astral bodies of the discarnates merging with the astral and physical bodies of the incarnate individual through the sympathetic nervous system. The desire of an embodied individual for a drink of alcohol is therefore multiplied as much as 1,000 times by the desires of the entities. This is a monumental revelation. You have just been given the true cause of addictions and the reason why people find it impossible to stop even when they know they may die. And this is why, when you are praying for someone to be cut free of an addiction such as smoking, you need to call to Archangel Michael to bind all demons and discarnates who actually possess the individual and literally take over his life to a point where he cannot exist unless he lights up a smoke. Now, here's the key to your freedom from any addiction. When you call for help from the Ascended Masters by giving calls to mighty Astrea and Archangel Michael, and you decide to be free from your addiction, you'll be surprised what miracles will happen to you. You can immediately be free of these harmful substances because the legions of light take from you all the entities behind the addiction. Free of them, all you have left to deal with is your own desire, which you can redirect with your decrees, prayers, and determination. Here's a story sent in from a member of our church who was severely addicted to cigarettes for several years, but had an amazing spiritual redemption that he wanted to share. This will illustrate exactly what we have been discussing. My name is Mike, and this is the story of how I beat the smoking habit. You will find the experience I'm about to share to be like no other you have ever heard, to say the least. For over 30 years, I had been smoking at least 30 cigarettes a day. That's about 3 smokes every waking hour. I tried to quit numerous times, but without any success. When I did try, I usually broke out in a rash or developed serious emotional and mental strain. I was a slave to this habit, and I knew it was slowly killing me. What was worse is realizing I was completely helpless to stop it. It came to a point that I was so desperate to find a solution that I finally appealed to God for help. Then one day, I met my old friend John at a restaurant for lunch. During our conversation, I explained my predicament. He started telling me about his church's teachings on addictions. He spent about an hour blowing my mind with information about the cause behind addictions that I had no idea existed. It was a hard pill to swallow, but I knew I had to hear it. One of the things John told me is that many entities take on a particular form related to the substance they are attracted to, and they even have names. Here's how he described the tobacco entity. This entity takes the form of a huge fat worm that wraps itself tightly around the person who smokes. Their head typically attaches to the third eye of the individual, which is one of the 7 major spiritual centers taught in Hinduism. Those with spiritual vision have seen this entity attached to people, which is why I can describe it to you now. The names of this entity are Nicola, Nicholas, and Inhaler. So, after hearing this shocking information, I realized that for 30 years I must have had a tobacco entity attached to me, literally sucking away my energy. As bizarre as this sounds, it's the only thing that made sense. No wonder every time I tried to quit smoking, I suffered from substantial mental, emotional, and physical problems that only went away when I had a smoke. John went on to say that addiction is more of a spiritual problem than a physical one, and the only way to solve spiritual problems like entities is with spiritual fire. With intense determination and resolve, you have to invoke God's fire into your body, mind, and soul so you can be cut free from these entities, which will be bound and permanently removed. One of the most effective ways to invoke God's fire is through the use of a powerful form of prayer called decrees, which thousands in our church all over the world practice regularly. Decrees are a combination of specifically formulated spoken prayers, fiats, and affirmations, coupled with focused visualizations. Decrees also call to the Lord's host, including certain archangels, angels, saints, and ascended masters, to direct their tremendous momentums of God's light into your life for a specific purpose, which in our case is the binding and removal of the nicotine entity and the inherent intense desire for smoking that it projects onto its victim through their nervous system. I told John I do pray and have meditated before, so I'll give these decrees a shot. After all, nothing else so far has worked. I just knew something very powerful had a hold of me and doesn't want to let go, so I thought it's time to call in some heavenly help. I became a member of the Summit Lighthouse and started giving the decrees they published. After a couple of weeks, I had managed to stop smoking 1 week before going to one of their conferences, but while attending, I became extremely agitated to the point where I couldn't sit in the chapel for more than 45 minutes at a time. I had to leave the property once a day and smoke 3 cigarettes in a row. Then I could return and be fairly comfortable and functional for the next several hours. Then the entity would raise its ugly head once more and I would have to leave again. After the conference, I decided I needed to get a lot more determined and intense with my decrees if I was going to beat this habit. So, I drove to Colorado and rented a rustic cabin there. It was high up in the pristine mountains, with only the bare necessities, but very peaceful. It was the perfect place to do my daily ritual of decrees, and I was determined not to return back home with this tobacco entity. I gave over 3 hours of decrees daily, and started to feel lighter and more confident in my resolve to overcome this 30-year addiction. One morning, as I awoke, I clearly heard a voice say to me, "Fast today and don't smoke." I thought, okay, I can do that for a day. I was attempting to limit the number of cigarettes I was smoking, keeping it under 10 a day, all the while keeping up the constant calls to be able to stop smoking completely. So I reached for my decree book and began my daily decrees. About an hour into them, I began to crave a cigarette, so decided to go make some herbal tea to help reduce the desire. On the way to the kitchen, I paused and began to flip through my decree book when I happened upon the entity decree. It was a long decree which named many entities, including the nicotine entity, so I decided to stand right where I was and give it. As I got into the decree, something really amazing happened. A large being of light appeared and stood right next to me. Strangely, I wasn't startled at all. All I felt was calmness and peace. He was holding a sword and began cutting this large slug off my body, which also seemed to appear. It was absolutely hideous looking and wrapped itself around me from above my head, all the way down to my feet. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It took several slashes of his sword to cut it off me completely. Then the entity was gone, and the being disappeared. I was overwhelmed with what I had just witnessed. I fell to my knees, pouring all my love and gratitude to God for this tremendous blessing and miracle. Everything John had told me was true because I saw it with my own eyes. Needless to say, a great burden had been lifted from my body, mind, and soul. From that day forward, the craving for cigarettes was completely gone. To make certain the craving for nicotine would never return again, I repeated the entity decree for a few more days. I can't begin to express how amazing this new feeling of freedom is. Since that day, I have never desired a cigarette, nor have I experienced any negative reactions, agitations, rashes, raw nerves, etc. I give all the glory to God and his hosts for helping me slay the tobacco entity and finally become free from this addiction. The message I want everyone to know is, they can be free of any addiction if they have the desire, will, determination, and they enlist the help of the Lord's hosts to cut them free. With God, all things are possible. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to help others beat their own addiction. Thanks to Mike for sending in his incredible story. It's an eye-opening witness that couples with what we have been exploring. I wanted to expand upon what John mentioned to Mike about the names of entities. There are historical accounts that emphasize the importance of knowing the name of the entity, or at least the condition they are affecting us with when we determine to clear them from our body. One such historical account I will read now is the story about the Gerasene demoniac that was recorded in the Bible. So here it is. They reached the territory of the Gerasenes on the other side of the lake, and when he disembarked, a man with an unclean spirit at once came out from the tombs towards him. The man lived in the tombs, and no one could secure him anymore, even with a chain, because he had often been secured with fetters and chains, but had snapped the chains and broken the fetters, and no one had the strength to control him. All night and all day, among the tombs and in the mountains, he would howl and gash himself with stones. Catching sight of Jesus from a distance, he ran up and fell at his feet and shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, do not torture me." For Jesus had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked, "What is your name?" He answered, "My name is Legion, for there are many of us." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the district. Now on the mountainside there was a great herd of pigs feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, "Send us to the pigs, let us go into them." So he gave them leave. With that, the unclean spirits came out and went into the pigs, and the herd of about 2,000 pigs charged down the cliff into the lake, and there they were drowned. The men looking after them ran off and told their story in the city and in the country round about, and the people came to see what had really happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demoniac sitting there, the man who had had the legion in him, properly dressed and in his full senses, and they were afraid. And those who had witnessed it reported what had happened to the demoniac and what had become of the pigs. Then they began to implore Jesus to leave their neighborhood. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed begged to be allowed to stay with him. Jesus would not let him, but said to him, "Go home to your people and tell them all that the Lord in his mercy has done for you." So the man went off and proceeded to proclaim in the Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. This is an important account that echoes what we have been considering throughout this episode. Just think of the insanity we have been seeing among people as they cause major disruptions in our society. Burning and destroying things, attacking others or destroying themselves with drugs. They don't seem to be in their right mind. They're behaving irrationally. We can sense something is not right with these individuals, and it seems to be getting worse. What we are exploring in this spiritual deep dive series could very well be the cause behind it all, so I think we should give careful consideration to the solutions mentioned. There is hope in the Lord. In closing, I wanted to mention that the resources in the notes include a link to the entity decree and another document that lists the names of many entities. Before giving this decree, be sure to first give the decree to Archangel Michael for his armor of protection. If you don't know what decrees are, listen to episodes 4 and 5 of this podcast, which give a complete explanation. Don't miss the last episode of the series where we will hear more commentary on the movie Ghost and reveal what really happens to psychics when they engage with discarnate entities. You will also learn all the ways that entities can steal your energy and what you can do to stop it. There's so much more to discover, so don't miss out on our next podcast. Thank you for listening to Spiritual Deep Dives. If you like this content, please like and subscribe to our podcast. We'll catch you in the next one.